Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today I'm covering an interview by a guy named David McRaney, where he talks to Mark Sargent about his life, his ascension to Flat Earth royalty, and most importantly and most interestingly, his belief on Flat Earth. This interviewer is really good, and I feel at certain points he wants to start debunking his claims, but as a professional and as a fantastic interviewer, he understands that keeping an interview civil will keep Mark relaxed and talkative, and that outweighs the desire to make him look stupid in front of a large audience. The interview doesn't really hone in on the Flat Earth stuff till about 30 minutes in, so we're going to pick it up right about the time that Mr. McRaney holds himself back from calling Flat Earth a cult. I'm not so sure that I'd have that discipline, but that's why he's a great interviewer, and I'm a Flat Earth debunker. So let's dive right in. Oh yeah, I'm going to speed this up about 15% because this clip is about 20 minutes long, and for, the sake of brevity, we're going to try to get through this as fast as possible.
Yeah. It's like joining a religious faith that you don't agree with or something that it's a belief system. That's the thing that makes this fascinating. And as far as psychology is concerned, a belief is a belief is a belief, neurologically, biologically.
Sure.
So that's why I want to talk about what you actually do believe, or as we would say in the business, your claims.
Right.
So I'm going to get into this, and if I'm not really watching the time, so somebody might have to grab my.
Who has the time?
My ankle. I've got it right here.
What do we watch?
So very simple questions. No judgment here. I'm just want to
No, ask. I've heard it. I got yelled at by a lot of drunk people in Dublin 2 days ago. So
This story is not very interesting, so we're going to skip it.
dozen people that showed up and took selfies because they knew us in like a really short amount of time. If that gives you any idea.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a well, excuse me.
No.
It's a worldwide.
Yeah,
movement.
worldwide.
Yep, Flat Earth has members from all around the globe.
So
This is funny because the audience starts laughing, and look at Mark's face. He knows this is bullshit.
What is the Earth really?
What is the Earth?
What is the Earth?
All right, I'll give you the short version real fast. So, mainstream science will say that you live here. Ooh, props.
You have a prop.
I know, right?
I was not aware of this.
I have two
This was
props.
not cleared by security.
No, we didn't script this. That you live on a little rock flying through space in multiple directions in an impossibly huge universe, and that you're insignificant and you don't mean anything. We say differently. We say that you live in a flat enclosed system, like the ancient cosmologies have said, years and years, centuries ago, if not millennia ago, and that there may be nothing outside of this. All the stars and the sun and the moon are on the inside, and you are incredibly significant. You are incredibly important, incredibly special. There's a theme there.
Yeah, the theme is, if you're paranoid, delusional, superstitious, and incredibly narcissistic, come join us.
But there's a catch. And again, every flat earther, which might attach to some of your questions, which is, do all flat earthers agree on exactly what this looks like, the dimensions and all the fundamentals of it, and the physics and the engineering? No, not at all. There's massive dissension in the ranks.
That's a subtle admission that the flat earth theory is nothing but nonsense. There is no evidence, there is no science, nothing supports the delusion. That's why there's so many different versions of it. No one has any evidence. They just come up with random stuff that sounds right to someone who has no knowledge, and then they just run with it. There is no flat earth model. But why do people who accept reality and trust science believe the same thing? Is it that we've all been systematically brainwashed by the shape-shifting reptilian overlords? Or is it because we have a model that works, that's backed up by observation, experimentation, pictures from space, and thousands of years of study? Not to mention, if you have at least 5 working brain cells, it's not that hard to understand.
However, what everyone can agree on, which is why I use that Scottish Highlands reference, everyone in the flat earth community, again, can agree on one thing. It's like, it's not this. There's something wrong with this. There are way more, and you're a big writer, there's way more plot holes in this than there is this. And, if you know what, I'm getting ahead of myself as far as why it resonates.
You have the stage. Go for it.
Okay, well, why it resonates? Why am I doing so many conferences? Why am I even here? Why did I just do that television commercial in Australia? Why all these things? Because we have now created a way of explaining this that's easier than this. And you're saying, well, yeah, but that doesn't mean that it's right. I'm going, well, Sun Tzu, The Art of War, people are like water. They always take the path of least resistance.
It isn't easier. The amount of mental gymnastics you have to perform to even remotely come close to start explaining Flat Earth would give any normal person a headache. It's not the path of least resistance. It's the path of least thought and learning.
They always will go for the easier thing, and because of that, it has resonated. We use very little mathematics, very few physics, although we do memorize a lot of basic things.
Oh man, the irony is so thick right here. How many of you guys have ever been told by a flat earther that you're just memorizing and regurgitating, well, they probably wouldn't say regurgitating, that's a big word, memorizing and repeating what you've been told by, you know, the globe priests or your religious cult or whatever they want to call it. Yeah, they don't do math and science because that would take mental power. And they're basically Apollo 13's capsule after the explosion, and they've turned everything off as to not exert any mental power whatsoever.
And that's how we see it.
I hear what you're saying,
Yeah.
that it's simpler, but it doesn't seem simpler to me. It seems very complicated.
Well, of course.
Because the first thing that makes this complicated to me is that seems like it's something that isn't naturally formed by the laws of physics. It seems like it's constructed.
Absolutely. One of our points, by the way. Oh, and let me throw this in here really quick. I don't want to jump around too much. But one of the big things, and again, I don't know the denominations of this room, but at least half of our members, at least in the States and most in the UK, are hardcore Christian. And so the cosmology, and they have latched on to the King James Bible in a big, big way and gone through it with a fine-tooth comb and said, well, basically the Bible is a flat earth book, with the exception of maybe one verse. And because of that, yes, what you were saying, this is not any sort of, it looks, built, it looks constructed, and that's our point, which is, okay, well, if it was built, then it was built by someone. And whether you believe it's some ancient civilization that's much older and more powerful than yourself, or Santa Claus in a bathrobe, you're really kind of splitting hairs.
So it could be gods or aliens that are like God.
Exactly. Did God make it, or did God subcontract out the work?
Boy, Mark is on fire! Basically just admitted that religious zealotry and Bible literalism results in flat earth thinking. Well done, Mark. Well done.
I thought the Bible said that there were four corners of the earth, so it would be like.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, in most of the models, as a matter of fact, because as you know, machines have a really hard time. Machines think really in squares. It's hard for a machine to think in circles. Most of the big models of this would be this sitting on some sort of squarish thing, but it's not as easy.
But you don't believe it's a square shape. It is a disc.
Oh, it might be. Well, I mean, on the outsides, it might be a square, but this part that we're living on is a disc.
And why the dome? What is this purpose?
Oh, why do you have a dome?
Because I've seen models that don't include the dome.
Okay. Well, good point. You've done some research here. In our community, maybe 70% of our community believe in the domed model, and another 30%, which is not a small percentage, believe that there is no dome, that it's an infinite plane. But most of the people believe that for a reason that they don't like being fenced in. They feel claustrophobic. But the dome, from a physics standpoint, works way, way better.
And how is the math handled where if you're on an airplane and I go this way, which the way I understand it, you go around the planet to get where you're going, and it'll be faster than going this way.
Right.
How does that handled with this model?
Oh, no, it's good. And so, people, first off, they say, how do you circumnavigate? If you take off in one direction, people have done it in planes, right? And you come back to the other direction. If you take your finger on a dinner plate and you move it around the outside rim, technically, and you come back to the same spot, technically you've circumnavigated that plate, but it's not a globe, it's not a sphere, it's not a ball.
But and I'm not judging, but I'm saying, it seems to me if you were doing that as a pilot, you'd see the edge the whole time you're making the circle, right?
Oh, you mean like if you're on the outer edge?
Yeah.
Well, sure, but then that goes into a whole other thing of the Antarctic Treaty. And again, I don't know how many people have watched my Flat Earth Clues or even watched the Behind the Curve documentary, but the Antarctic Treaty was one of the things that kind of pushed me, the tipping point for me, which is...
This is the Treaty of Nations to lay claim to that.
Antarctica is the only treaty, the Antarctic Treaty is the only treaty that's never been broken in the history of mankind, and no one can go down there. Other than military science.
No one can mine it or
the what?
Claim it. Yeah.
I mean,
this is where the interviewer is really tap dancing on this line of being a professional and just interviewing Mark Sargent and getting his thoughts and trying not to debunk him in real time. And it's funny that Mark's like, well, the Antarctic Treaty is one of the things that got me in it. So basically, he's admitting that not reading a Wikipedia page is something that completely changed his life. Not doing research is what got him into it. And the interviewer is like, well, you can't go down and drill. And like I said, being a professional didn't push it because people go down there all the time. I've said it countless times. You can take a cruise to Antarctica. There are scientists there right now, as we speak, doing science. The Antarctic Treaty says you can't have a military base down there. You can't do weapons testing down there. And big corporations who have a history of destroying the planet can't go down there and drill until like 2048. He also never answered the question of why the pilots don't ever see the edge when they're flying down around Australia or whatever, Chile. But I understand why he didn't press the issue.
If you're a corporation, let's say you're British Petroleum, you cannot set up shop there.
Although I think some people are starting to lay claim to certain areas.
Well, claims is one thing, but corporation-wise, you can't send anyone down there. You know, I mean, and I get it. You know, when I was, again, if I would have done the same thing, you know, and by the way, there's another premise to this in that the best and brightest people, we didn't even detect this thing. We had the maps, but we didn't even have the technology to prove it out to the military and the governments until about 1960, when we had, you know, decent airplanes.
So it was constructed.
Right.
It didn't form naturally.
Right.
Is this floating through space, or is it hoisted upon something? How is it?
Why there doesn't have to be space. That's their thing. If all the stars are on the inside, that could be it. Which is also another one of our points, which makes it easier. Which is these two things seem to be the exact same size, or roughly the same size, same mass. You could hold the same amount of people, except that this cannot exist on its own. This needs a whole bunch of things to support it. It needs a sun, it needs the solar system, it needs a galaxy around that, and a universe around that, not to mention geometry and trigonometry and calculus and quantum mechanics. That's it. That's all you need. In fact, who'd say there's 7 billion people living in that thing right now?
Yeah, we ain't good at that math stuff, science and all that shit. We don't need none of that. We got our own model. We're just in our own little snow globe. And God made us so we don't have to think about all that stuff.
What's on the bottom?
The what?
What's on the bottom side of it?
Oh, on this, it's a coin. No, this was made by an Italian company. They just called me.
No, I'm talking about the actual flat Earth. What's on the bottom?
We don't know. I mean, what's the core of the Earth, for example? Deep, little quick thing for you guys, may or may not know, and that is the deep. If you believe in this, then you believe that the core of the Earth is 4,000 miles straight down, give or take. And we've all seen the cross sections in the science labs, you know, red and orange and yellow and white, you know, that white creamy center. Deepest hole ever drilled was by the Germans and the Soviets, 8 miles, 12 kilometers.
Right. So this brings up an interesting point. There are many mysteries of the universe to which we have only a few pieces of evidence so far. We don't have the tools, or perhaps we haven't done the work yet.
Yeah.
I think there is a conception that in something like the flat Earth, that the people who believe this have an answer for absolutely everything. But if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that there's a lot of room for mystery within this model as well.
Oh yeah, we don't have that. I mean, I've been doing this 4 years. So we don't have the answers, not even close.
So how did people figure out that it was flat? I mean, what were the clues that led to this? If you don't have the answers to everything,
we don't have the. I can tell you it's a good one. Which is, again, for anyone here, can I prove this to you in a court of law right now? No, I can't. But can I create so much reasonable doubt in this that you have nowhere left to turn but to some sort of model like that? Yeah, I can.
Yeah, if you find somebody with no scientific knowledge whatsoever, an inability to comprehend science, with a history of paranoia, superstition, maybe the belief in a different fairy tale, one to another, you know, because people convert all the time. I'm sure Scientology gained 1 or 2 members in the last week or so. So, I mean, you know, adults are very persuadable if they're not very smart.
Do it all day long. And that is why, if you want, again, why it resonates the way it does. That is one.
This is interesting to me for a lot of reasons. This, the reasonable doubt thing you're talking about. Yeah. It seems to me that you've created a very high degree, a very high standard of proof for the globe model.
Yes, very high.
And it's not immediately apparent to me that you are holding the flat Earth to that same degree of proof.
Well,
man, I really like this interviewer.
The science community tries to do that, but again, remember, we are really young by comparison. This has been out there for better part of 5 centuries, whereas this is the new version of this. We call ourselves basically Flat Earth 2.0, whereas the old societies would be 1.0. We're still, working through it.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I want to I don't want to misrepresent you in any way.
Yeah.
You're sort of leaving it, this is a very old model,
Right.
and this is a very young one,
Yep.
and this is, to you, just a new hypothesis
Yeah.
that you're putting out there into the mix
Yeah.
that can be tested scientifically like any other hypothesis.
Yeah.
And how, to the best of your understanding, has it stood up to that testing so far?
Really, really well. I'll give you a quick five-point breakdown.
Okay.
Which is, because we've had to come up with our own tests, and science has challenged us with our own tests. So there's a German, and you guys might know it better than I. There's a German television company network out there called ZF1, and they contacted me because I put a challenge. I go, give me somebody in astrophysics, give me somebody with a master's or PhD in something that I can talk to, and they found a guy out of Georgetown. And they said, okay, what we're going to do, because we don't want you guys talking over each other, we want to make this compartmentalized. We're going to have you record 5 quick questions, and we're going to take that video and play it for him, and he's going to respond, and we're going to go back and forth. You guys will probably not actually talk to each other at all, maybe. So they go, you start. And so I gave him 5 quick points, and I won't break them all down for you just because of time. But the first one would be long-distance photography, that you can see way farther with HD cameras than you than you should be able to, because of the curvature of the Earth with its 8 inches per mile squared.
Well, it's not actually 8 inches per mile squared, but I'm not going to get into that right now. But when you put in the viewer height into an Earth curve calculator, which is something that flat earthers conveniently forget to do, you find that you see what you should see almost every single time. This has been debunked 1,000 times.
Second one would be gravity versus the vacuum of space. How does the vacuum of space not rip off our atmosphere entirely? Which I've got some great arguments for.
Yeah, I'm sure you have some fantastic arguments for that. Once again, the vacuum of space does not suck. And it's certainly not going to rip the atmosphere away from the Earth.
Not going to get into it in a second. Eclipse shadow, too small. The blackout zone is 70 miles wide on a 2,000 mile wide object, but yet we don't see the same thing when the Earth is in front of the sun.
Nope. Already schooled Vlad about this one. The umbra is 70 miles wide, but the penumbra is about 2,500 to 3,000 miles wide.
And the moon temperature, which I thought was just a bizarre thing that came up with by somebody else, which the moon actually generates its own cold light up to 13 degrees Fahrenheit colder than moon shade, which shouldn't be possible. And which doesn't, of course, prove a flat Earth, but it does absolutely destroy the relationship between the sun and the moon.
The captive radiated heat from the Earth makes it warmer underneath whatever is creating the shadow. When you're out from underneath whatever is capturing the heat, it's obviously going to be a bit cooler.
And last but not least, the Van Allen radiation belts, which is the Van Allen radiation belts, which were announced by NASA in 1959. If they're so deadly, then how did the Americans get through them round trip with aluminum shielding? Things can stop radiation: gold, lead, and a whole bunch of water. And you can't put those on any capsules. Nobody died, nobody got cancer. There's still 5 of them walking around today.
Man, you don't do research on anything, do you? A quick Google search pulled up an article from the Telegraph from July 28, 2016, entitled, "Moon Disease, Apollo Astronauts Are More Likely to Die of Heart Problems," and I'll link to that article in the description. In the article, the author mentions that the astronauts, a few of them have died from heart complications, but more to Mark's point here, or I guess more against Mark's point here, Alan Shepard died of leukemia in '98, and Apollo 13's Jack Swigert died of cancer in 1982. Now, the Van Allen radiation belts apparently weren't as deadly as they thought they were going to be, and when they left Earth, they kind of skirted around the worst parts of them. And if you look up on YouTube the transcripts or the audio recording between the astronauts and Houston, there were a few times right at the beginning there when they were leaving the Earth that they asked them if they felt okay. And halfway through they did tests on the cameras just to make sure that everything was going well. They didn't know what they were going to get into. Okay, that's why it was such a crazy thing. These guys were so brave, literally going where no man has gone before. Is it any wonder that Mark believes what he believes? When you do zero research, you have the freedom to believe whatever cockamamie thing you want to believe.
So, and I fired off those 5 points, and he folded like a card table immediately.
Who did?
The guy at Georgetown.
Oh.
And he folded, and that was it. ZF1 got really bent out of shape, and they said, oh, crap, and they couldn't run the segment, and that was it. I still have the thing recorded on my channel as far as the interview with me and ZF1 as they were like setting it up.
Yeah.
Really? A physicist from Georgetown couldn't answer those questions? Sorry, I don't buy it.
I hear what you're saying. I've heard some of these before, but not all of them. Some of them are new.
Yeah.
There's when you move into the rhetoric and philosophy, they talk about putting things into context, and this isn't. I feel like we're moving into the context of we have to choose what epistemology we're going to stick to make sense of things, and to take this and move it into as a competing hypothesis with other hypotheses, you have to disregard a lot of testimonies from researchers and from astronomy going all the way back to the Greeks, and you have to disregard a lot of stuff.
Yes.
And
and throw out a whole bunch of new stuff as well.
Correct. And there's also photographic evidence that has to be explained in some way or another. I guess what I'm interested here is we could all be in a simulation, right?
Oh yeah. As a
Like-
matter of fact, I'm a huge simulation guy, by the way.
Right. So that's when you throw something like that out, it makes nothing
Impossible.
nothing's impossible. But to have any reasonable scientific discussion, we have to say
You have to stay away from simulations.
you don't have to stay away from it, but you have to say we're using some standard by which to determine whether or not we have confidence in something.
Right.
So when it comes to, let's say, the flat Earth, from 0 to 100, what would you say your confidence level is that the Earth is flat?
Extremely high.
Is it 100% or is it?
Well, it can't be 100%, but I'd say 99.
So if you were to see evidence,
I'd quit. I'd quit in a second.
you would quit.
Absolutely quit.
So you're willing to give up this belief if you were found compelling evidence.
Which is different from the documentary, and I know Daniel, and I know they spun that at the end. But no, I've told people all the time, I go, look, I will quit this thing tomorrow if you can blow it away. And that's what I was asking for in the beginning. I literally wanted somebody to call me up from MIT, or Harvard, or Yale, or Oxford, or whatever else is out there, and say, look, shoot it down. Tell me where I went wrong.
So how would a person go about figuring out, what to you do you consider reasonable when it comes to testing this? Because there are people who have presented tests and said, it fails my test, and I'm assuming you disagree with them.
Right.
What do you consider to be a good
Are there
way
any tests that could get me out of flat Earth right now?
How does a person go about figuring out what is and is not true?
Just in general, what is and what is not true, or just with this?
Because apparently the methods we're using don't apply very well to this, or for some reason there's some reason you don't trust the current evidence that's out there as being worthwhile.
Right. Well, the American space program was easier for us because remember, Apollo was in doubt way before this. Apollo was doubt in the 1970s. So by the time this came around, every doubt that anyone ever had about the American space program was then reinvigorated. So that was the first thing that everybody goes after, which is you have to dismiss basically the entire space program. And yes, it's not hard to do. I could show you a random shot from Apollo 12, put it up on screen, and I say, look, I see at least 6 things wrong with this. How many do you see? The point is you shouldn't see any.
Yeah, because you're probably intentionally misconstruing what you're seeing or just misinterpreting what you're seeing. I did a debunk video of one of Paul and the Plane's anti-NASA videos, and it was the easiest video I've ever made. This stuff, it's when you're predisposed to see it, your confirmation bias will prove that you're right to you, but not to anybody else.
So why are they there? And then you have to go after the space programs first because a lot of people lean on that. However, I will put this to you guys. There was a great line by George Orwell, from 1946 when he wrote it in the Tribune. And he's not a flat earther, right? But he was talking about the responsibility of science because we all take everything that science says for granted. We just do. If you wear a white lab coat and walk around, massive amounts of credibility. So he said, you could go to anyone on the street and ask them how they know the world is a globe. And the first answer will always be the same. It's like, well, what are you talking about? We all know. It is known, Game of Thrones. It's a given, right? It's a given. We all know. And then you push them on it. And he said this. He goes, you go, really, how do you know? And then they start getting angry because they realize they don't. Remember, this was 1946. How did everybody in the world in 1946 know it was a globe? NASA wasn't founded until 1958.
I find it cute that you guys fixate on NASA, but guess what? NASA is not the arbiter of all space knowledge. Would Eratosthenes work for NASA? No, because NASA wasn't formed until 1958.
How did everybody know this? And it wasn't because you knew, it's because you were told. That model had been in...
And this is a big sticking point for you, the idea that I feel like you're the kind of person, and I've met many people like this, and I think it's fantastic, that you would rather do your own research in one way or another. That
Yes.
you want to see for yourself.
Yes,
And it's difficult to trust whoever these people may be, even if they are people in lab coats.
I'm a big believer of science, but I think that science has kind of jumped the rails and jumped into what I call scientism, to where they just assume it's like whatever we say, people are going to buy. One of my favorite quotes is from Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I put this in my usual presentations, which is he came out and he said, "Science is true whether or not you believe in it." And I thought that was one of the most arrogant things I've ever heard, which basically means, if we say that it's a fact, it's a fact. And it's like, yeah, until the day it isn't. Science is wrong about lots of things all the time.
This is a self-correcting mechanism. And
Yeah, science is wrong a lot. But that's the thing about science is it is a pursuit of knowledge. It is trying to explain the world we see around us the best possible way they can at any given time. It does change, it evolves. And when they're wrong, unlike a lot of people, especially flat earthers, they admit that they're wrong and they change their stance on things. That's what science is. And Neil deGrasse Tyson saying science is right, whether you believe it in or not, doesn't mean take us for our word because we're always right. It means you don't have to believe it for it to be true. Like if I say, we measured the weight of this bowling ball versus the weight of this golf ball, and the bowling ball is heavier. Science, calculations prove that the bowling ball is heavier. Now you can say, I don't believe it. I think that golf ball's heavier than that bowling ball. Well, regardless of whether you believe the bowling ball is heavier or the golf ball is heavier, the bowling ball is still heavier. That's what he meant. Alright, this video is already long enough. I'm just going to quit here, but I really, really encourage you to go and watch this interview. The whole thing is great. This guy is amazing. He does a podcast too, I guess. So definitely go check it out. If you like my content and you'd like to see more of it, give the video a like, give the channel a subscribe, and until next time, have a good day.